My brother just told me. Jay, why are we laughing so much? How many years, John?
I started teaching Hamlet when Lyndon Johnson was president.
And she says, I met the youthful Lord Paris at Lawrence's cell and gave him what becoming love I might, not overstepping the bounds of modesty.
No, I already did that with the other
I should
guy.
say not.
Him and Beowulf and...
But you know, when he dies, he's like desperate to be remembered. Tell my story. Remember me.
Should we be doing this? Should we stop right now?
No.
All right. Hey, Jay, how are you doing this evening?
Hey, Paul, what's going on?
Yeah, not a ton. It's teacher talk time where we're continuing on going through the Odyssey, book 15. It's great. We're better than halfway through finally.
Yep.
And, tracking toward the end here. It's a fantastic fall evening here. I'm looking outside the window. I almost wish I was recording outside. Maybe I'll try that sometime. It's beautiful, sunny and nice.
It's beautiful here too. It's nighttime now.
Yeah.
But it was 70s at school today. It's really nice.
Oh man. Yeah, it was so perfect. We had a fire alarm. And so we all ran out during last period, and then
was it a planned one, or was it an oopsie?
Yeah, well, it was planned, but none of us knew about it. So
okay,
we were just talking about rhetorical questions, and so my students were like, "Was that a rhetorical fire alarm?" They were trying to make some kind of connection. I was like, "All right, plus 3 points for you. That's pretty cool."
Yeah,
but we didn't want to come back inside. It was too beautiful.
You should have asked them, hey, when do the rhetorical questions end? That's a dad. It's a dad.
I missed that opportunity. That's really good. So I was considering whether to tell them the Latin term for the rhetorical question, which is erotima.
Oh,
in which
nice.
I knew they would hear like eros or erotic in it. And then I was just kind of doing the math for the various kids in the room and how that would land and what they would say. And all this
teaching teenagers.
Yeah. So I didn't throw that out there.
They can make a plank of wood erotic. So,
exactly.
It's hard to avoid that. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, we're trucking along. We've got a real transitional scene here in the Odyssey. We want to get down to it and do our normal breakdown. Start with a poem, get a little summary, and then get into our 3 breakdown points for this chapter. The obvious and essential, the subtle and consequential, and then questions, problems, puzzles, sort of those lingering questions that we have after having taught this for years that we hope will sort of direct your interest in this text. So if you're a teacher and you're thinking of taking on the Odyssey and drawing your students through it, and I think you should, Jay and I are talking to you. I'd like to talk with you about how to do that and our experience in doing it. Jay, I was listening to some students talk today in sort of a free block. And there's a teacher who's taking them through some really great texts. They're going through the Odyssey, and then she was taking them through Dante's Inferno, which I was really happy to hear. But she's really pushing them, but going through kind of fast. And they were complaining. They're like, I tried the reading last night, and then I gave up. It was Canto 5. And they're like, I have no idea what's going on. And I said, this teacher, she's great. She takes you through a lot. I said, there's basically 2 ways to do it. One, you can go slow and dig into it, but you don't get a ton done. Or you go a lot more quickly, but you give students exposure, to a lot more text. And she's doing more of the exposure route. So I appreciate it. But it just kind of reminded me of the value of I don't know. I felt a little pang, I guess, in hearing those students talk, because I take much more of the former approach, and I want students to read every page, and I want to, if not talk about every page, definitely talk about each chapter. And so I think that's the approach we're taking here. Much more so. Mm-hmm. So if you're following along with us, we're on book 15. In my translation, the Robert Fitzgerald, or the translation I'm using, the Robert Fitzgerald, it's How They Came to Ithaca. Jay's following through the Emily Wilson, very great translation as well. What's that chapter title for 15?
The Prince Returns.
All right, The Prince Returns.
It would be different if it was Prince Returns, because Then it's purple rain. Odysseus is in a storm. He comes up with a little red Corvette and he parties like it's 1999.
Yeah, this is not that. I like
Yeah,
that
it's too
title.
bad.
Yeah, it's a little more literal. How they came to Ithaca is more,
Yeah.
I don't know, enigmatic or something. But Prince Return kind of gets to it.
Yeah.
But before we jump in, let's open with a poem,
Yeah.
as we like to do. So I have a poem
You have
here.
one, right?
I do. I
Yeah.
got one this time. I can present a poem here. This is a Robert Gibb poem that I found years ago, and it corresponds more to the time of year, to the fall, than it does to this chapter in the book. However, there's a little bit of drama and tension in the poem that I think goes along with our chapter. So this poem is called. Oh, wait a minute! I said Robert Gibb. It's not Robert Gibb. It's Bruce Weigel. Bruce Weigel, and his poem "My Autumn Leaves." So, "My Autumn Leaves" by Bruce Weigel. I watch the woods for deer as if I'm armed. I watch the woods for deer who never come. I know the he's and she's in autumn rendezvous in orchards stained with fallen apples' scent. I drive my car this way to work so I may let the crows in corn believe it's me their calls are meant to warn. And snakes who turn in warm and secret caves, they know me too. They know the boy who lives inside me still won't go away. The deer are ghosts who slip between the light through trees, so you may only hear the snap of branches in the thicket beyond hope. I watch the woods for deer as if I'm armed. My Autumn Leaves.
Nice.
By Bruce Weigel.
Very nice.
I like that poem. I found it kind of striking. And I like the line, I find kind of the central line, which is, they know the boy who lives inside me still won't go away. And it reminded me of our chapter, which begins the poignant juxtaposition of Telemachus, the boy, and Odysseus, the man. Yep. And the two are nearly pushed together, kind of brilliantly sided one to another in this chapter. And the poem really did make me think for the first time of Telemachus as a mirror image of Odysseus, or as an almost like time travel historical look back at Odysseus and what he might have been when he was 18, 19, 20 years old. Yep. So that's My Autumn Leaves by Bruce Weigel. But let's jump into book 15 then, The Prince Returns, or How They Came to Ithaca. It's sort of a plot-driven chapter that helps pull some threads together for us. Let's start off with I think between the elements I have, the obvious and essential and all this, it kind of will function as the summary. I don't know. Do you want to jump right into the obvious and essential and go?
Yeah, I actually, I guessed what you may be talking about. So I picked kind of quirky things.
All right, good. No, I like that. That's better.
Yeah, no. So it opens. I'm fascinated by this character Theoclemenus.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm fascinated about him in and of himself, and I'm fascinated about the question, what are we the audience supposed to make of his presence? So if you're about to read this, or if you've read it, you know that Athena goes and kind of retrieves Telemachus to return to Ithaca. And while, Menelaus and Helen, all them getting him set up to leave, this random guy appears, and he's sort of by himself, and he's the son of a prophet, and he's a murderer, and he's a fortune teller, and his resume is very diverse. He has a very diverse CV, and he begs for hospitality. And so I just wanted to read a little chunk and then talk about it. Is that okay?
Oh, fantastic. Please do.
This is for my obvious passage where I know it's not obvious, so I'm being a wise guy.
Okay, that's fine.
but I don't know. The reason I chose it as obvious is that one of the main concerns the book seems to have is not just what is a good man, but how does a good man behave in the world? And one of the objective things that doesn't change. I think a lot of epic literature evolves in what it believes, but one of the consistencies is that a good man is hospitable to strangers. And we know that Xenia is connected to Zeus himself, that Zeus likes people who treat strangers as if they could be gods. So we've already discussed that in other episodes. I think in a nutshell, Theo Clementis reminds us that, like, you know, Paul, if you and I in our neighborhood have new neighbors across the street and we make a casserole and walk it over and welcome them, it's nice to make a casserole, but it's not super dangerous to do. Like hospitality for people now, for the most part, isn't dangerous. It's just kind.
Right.
Hospitality to strangers in Homer is always, strangers are inherently dangerous.
Yeah.
You know? So this guy is objectively even more dangerous because of his resume. So it's around line 221 in the Wilson.
Okay.
Quickly they obeyed and sat along the benches. As he worked with prayers and sacrifices to Athena, a foreigner approached him, Telemachus, so this is Theo Clementis approaching him, who had killed a man in Argos. And I wrote Johnny Cash in the margins because I just imagine, like, he shot a man in Argos just to watch him die.
To watch him die, you know? Yeah.
Both Homer and Johnny Cash, I argue, are universal. And hey, you know, there's a PhD thesis there.
Oh yeah. No, there's something just waiting to be picked up.
So
all right, this is the spot in the Fitzgerald. It's line 275 about. So
Paul, you have The Man in Black.
Yeah.
And this is a poem written by a guy who only sees black. So there you go. So he killed a man in Argos and had run away. That's bad. Killing's bad. But if you're an outlaw on the run, oh man. He was a prophet. That's another thing. And descended from Melampus, who once lived in Pylos, land of sheep. Melampus had been rich and owned a palace, but he left his home, escaping from Neleus, a proud, important man. If you're keeping score, like, good luck keeping track of this. But interestingly, he's a foreigner, he's a killer, he's a prophet. He grew up very much privileged. And Neleus was an important guy, seized all the great wealth while he was trapped and tortured in the house of Flaccus because a fury put inside his mind, this is an ancestor of Theoclemus, a dangerous obsession with the daughter of Neleus. Yeah. He managed to, but wait, there's more. Okay. So, no, honestly, like, it goes on, and we have wives that take bribes, and we have, it's a great made-for-TV movie. It's not a guy you want to hang out with. So, ultimately, I think this is quote-unquote obvious, because if we're going to see Telemachus evolve from boyhood to adulthood, I think the poem would say that one of the criterion for becoming a man is to make dangerous choices that also follow the will of someone like Zeus. So are you ready to do that? Are you ready to take on your boat a guy who could kill you, but it's the right thing to do? So you can make that argument, or you could make the argument that he's still a kid because he takes a friggin' murderer on the boat. Like, what are you doing?
Right. Who would do that?
So I think Theo Clementis is a wonderful wild card character. If you're writing a movie or a book, think of all the things that he is. You can put him in Ithaca, and then literally anything could happen. He could be reading prophecies. He could be killing people because he's already done that. He's a person of privilege, so he probably knows how to behave around rich people. So anyway, to me, he's interesting, and I think our watching the boy Telemachus behave towards him and accept him and take him with him, that's interesting. Like, those are worthy discussions, I think, and it's not something to skim over.
That's great. Yeah, and he is like, it's hard to know what to do with him. But you start, if you think about him for a few minutes, you start having a lot of different ideas about what to do. And so I think he's great to focus on. Obvious in that sense, like don't skip over him. And there you can get to a lot of essential things from there, like the guest host thing. There, the question of Telemachus and the whole reason why he's out in the world and his manhood and his relationship to his father. It's you can get there through Theoclymenus, who feels like, why is he here again? Like this just he seems kind of random. And the story, the backstory you get as you started to read is very complicated. So as you read through this and look at it and try to follow along. But if you're trying to building a family tree out of it, it's it'll take you a little while to figure it out. In short, he comes from wealth and privilege. He comes from the Fitzgerald translation says Melampos was a wizard. He uses the word wizard in the translation. This man's a rich lord and a wizard. So he has this whole fortune.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's got the little thing on his forehead. It's amazing. Yeah. So that's good. I'm glad you pointed that out as obvious and essential. I want to pull back just a hair for my obvious and essential that I think you want to focus on in this book is, I'm paging through, looking at looking at the lines, and then I start going backwards. We're in book 15, and you have to go all the way back. Like this chapter picks up a plot thread that was dropped in book 4. The last time we heard from Telemachus was a long time ago. We're back in book 4 when we're talking to Menelaus and Helen, the red-haired king in Sparta. So this book opens with south into Lake Daemon. Athena went to put in mind of home the great heroes. Lake Daemon is a word that means Sparta. That's what it means. Yep. That's where it is. It's Sparta. The word has a history, but in short, we're talking about Sparta. You're like, wait a minute, Sparta. When? And if you start looking back, you go and you're 11 books back, and he just picks this thing up. So what I want to throw out there is as obvious and essential, and it sort of has an A and a B, is the plot mastery of this text. That even though there are these parentheticals and these paraphrastic sort of storytelling techniques that all seem to be offline, a chapter like this reminds you there is a plot genius, behind this book, and Homer has picked up a thread that he's dropped in a very natural way, and he's going to do something almost magical with it. First of all, he's going to pick up Telemachus, who he's just left sort of idling over here about 11 books ago, working back into the chapter. That's part A, or working back into the story, into the plot. And part B is he's going to, and this is really genius, he is going to bring him right up to Eumaeus's front door, where we just left Odysseus, his father. And this is great. It's like really good television that you're pleased to be snowed over by, because he puts things together that, it's really improbable. You think of the probability of Telemachus and Odysseus ever seeing each other again when Telemachus leaves. It's like your parents told you when you were a kid. If you get lost in the mall, don't walk around, just stay there, one place. Right. I'll find you. Stay
by the Orange Julius.
Yeah, by the Orange Julius. If you keep moving, and I'm at the Cinnabon and you're at the Orange whatever, find each other. So you stand still, I will find you. But they're both moving. They're never going to find each other again. And and they do. And Homer, through the medium of Athena, who visits Telemachus in the night as he's sleeping at Helen's house in Sparta, he realizes, I got to get back home. Now he had that thought before. Remember, his whole plan was to leave, go out into the world. Athena says, grow up, be a man, go out in the world, find out what's going on. Don't just sit here at home and suffer all this that's going on. Take control of your household. If you go look for word about your father, if you find out word about your father, that there's some stories about him that he's still alive, come back home, wait a year, give him 1 year, tell everyone, we'll give it a year. And then we're going to make the next move. Either dad's going to be back, or we're going to hold a very public funeral and it's going to be over. And then I'm going to give my mother over. Like, we're going to move forward. So he's done it. He's gone out into the world. Menelaus gave him information about his father in this long side story. He tells him
Yep.
that he found out in a really weird way from Proteus, the old man of the sea, that Odysseus was still alive and was on Ojija and wasn't dead, even though a couple other people, significantly Agamemnon, is dead. So he's found out that news. Telemachus wakes up at the beginning of this chapter and realizes, I got to go home. I got to go. Like, he wants to go right now. He wants to go. It's 2 a.m. He wants to go. But they wait. They get gifts from Menelaus and from Helen. And then they head back home. So I want to say, as the obvious and essential, is that there's a brilliant little plot thing stewing. And if you've ever tried to write your own fiction, which I really have, I was just shocked about how difficult plotting is. It's really hard to come up with an interesting plot. And this is just
Aristotle says in the Poetics, I think, when it comes to tragedy, but that it's the most important thing.
Yeah.
It's not everything. It's not everything, but you have to have it.
It's hard to measure it, but it is, yes, you have to have it. And it's difficult. It must be like, I'm not a music writer, but it must be like coming up with a new melody.
Yeah.
I mean, aren't all the melodies used up by now? You can't come up with
That's the amazing thing. And Aristotle makes the point, I think this is the case for music as well, but with a story, that one of the criterion for it being excellent is that if you remove any piece of it, the whole structure falls, that nothing is superfluous. And I don't know, it's interesting to have a conversation about a poem that's so long and then asking, is there anything that's superfluous, and how does one judge what's superfluous in something that's 3,000 years old, written for a different culture, a different audience, a different level of literacy, a different
right.
You know what I mean? So we would look at we would look at superfluous as, as a people whose attention span is somewhat different. But even if you have a good attention span, the way, I think if you were writing a 500-page novel and you introduce an important character and leave a cliffhanger on chapter 4 and don't get to him for 300 pages, your editor might want to talk to you.
Yeah. They're going to have suggestions. Yeah.
But I wonder, is part of, with orally composed things, and we can think of Beowulf in this regard too, the audience, this is veering off, but I think it's interesting. The audience knows the plot already. The audience of this poem is not wondering what's happening to Telemachus ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like us the first time reading it, or our kids the first time reading it.
Yeah. So there's no anxiety around it, or there's no get back to it, or else you're going to lose me because I can't stop thinking about the fact that I need to know what's going on.
Yeah. And I tell my students, we just finished Beowulf a while ago, that it's a longer, more ornate version of your grandmother or grandfather's stories that they say every Thanksgiving. And you don't correct them because they're your grandparents. And that's an essential part of your family history. So shut up and listen and learn those stories. You don't listen to them because you're wondering, what happens at the end? No, you could tell the story yourself. I mean, they repeat the same things.
Right.
But there's a value in the telling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wonder if that's
it
part
does
of
feel like it has that kind of patience, or that kind of it makes sense of the pacing, of it, which is completely different and outside of our common experience. But it is if you bring your modern sensibility of something that's really tight knit, like Better Call Saul, or Breaking Bad, where everything's really, really well scripted and put together, and you're looking for that tight knit thing. This begins to speak of it. You're reminded, oh my gosh, it's 11 books ago since we talked about that. How do you get away with that? But then there is that pleasing part of it that is, oh yes, we're starting to tie this back together. And you begin, if you've lost a little trust in your narrator, or you're sick of being given side stories that seem superfluous and endless. Here we go. We're tying these knots back together. These threads back together into a really tight knot. So I like that for obvious and essential. So I think as you're going through this chapter, you need to connect it to the main plot. This is a story about Odysseus. His name's on the cover of the book, but it opens with Telemachus. The first 4 books, Odysseus doesn't appear, and so he's a key player here as well. And this puts Odysseus back on stage. So that's nice. Yeah. That's nice. Well, let's move to the second, our second part here. What's subtle, nevertheless consequential It's a subtle
So I have,
thing, but
yeah,
you need to know it.
I have something offbeat.
All right, I like
It's
that.
it's the importance of Helen.
Really, to this chapter.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and just well, I just full disclosure, I just finished reading Emily Wilson's Odyssey translation, and she's obviously pretty darn important to the Odyssey. I
Or
mean,
Iliad.
to the Iliad translation.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
the
yeah.
Iliad.
Right,
Um,
right.
she talks and behaves differently than every other important woman, and I just think that's worth pointing out. So this on lines 103 and 107. So
Okay.
essentially, her job as Menelaus's queen is, in this instance, to play good host to Telemachus and then to bid him farewell with adequate, gifts and acknowledgments and all that
Yes.
stuff. So there's a couple of passages. This is 103 in the Wilson. Helen stood beside the chest in which she kept the special clothes that she had worked with her own hands.
Yeah.
She lifted the most elaborate and largest robe that shone like starlight under all the rest. So it's not that she just goes to like Walmart and gets clothes for Telemachus or a nicer store,
All
George
right.
Mark, but she actually, in weaving, it is incredibly important in Homer.
Yeah.
Weaving and unweaving, and it's a metaphor that's used for things that aren't weaving. So she makes it like she's controlling the Xenia, which is an entirely male concept, but playing a good host, she's actually participating in it.
Yeah.
And Helen says to Telemachus in 123, "Sweet boy," which sounds like a mother's phrase.
Yeah.
"I also have a gift crafted by my own hands." There's that again. "Remember, Helen, when your own wedding day at last arrives, and let your bride wear this. Until that time, your mother should take care of it." This is a robe she makes. "I wish you great joy. I hope you reach your well-built home and fatherland." So again, it's the thing she does. It's how she builds the thing, and then just her tone talking. But then, oh, but wait, an eagle appears,
Yes.
and weirdly, I don't think any other mortal woman ever reads a prophecy in the Iliad or the Odyssey, but Helen says so. The people are wondering, like, what does this mean? And Helen, it says Helen cut in first
Yeah.
and said,
Yeah.
and again, I tell my students, like, pay attention to what's being said, but tone matters. I mean, anybody that's raised teenagers, right, knows that. So now listen, she says, and I will make a prophecy, very assertive. She said, "The gods have put it in my heart, and I believe it will come true. Just as the eagle flew down from the mountains where he has his home with chicks and parents, seizing the tame goose, so will Odysseus, who has been gone so long and has endured so much, come back and take revenge. Indeed, he is already at home and planting ruin for the suitors." So I find it interesting. Her tone's interesting. What she knows is interesting. Her confidence is interesting. Her maternal instincts are interesting. She's a layered character. She's not a war prize. You know what I mean? And then returned with the receipts. She's a lot more than that. And I find it interesting that she is the first domino to fall that even precedes the Iliad. And she's one of the last, she helps basically set the stage for the homecoming. That's the climax of the Odyssey.
Yeah, like by committing herself. In fact, he's already home there. Not only will he do this, but I'll tell you what's true right now, and we know it is true. And so that's a pleasure, to read that, and a shock.
Yep.
It's great, and I noted that as well at this when the eagle comes down at this, and the people ask, Menelaus, they go to Menelaus first. "Oh, Menelaus, read us this sign. What's going on here? What's going on?" At this, the old friend of the god of battle groped in his mind for the right word to say. Fitzgerald's like, and while he's stammering, Helen jumps in, says, "I'll tell you exactly what's going on." And she does. Yeah, she is. Yeah. She's amazing. She's amazing at this. To meet her, to hear her talk. If you read the Iliad, to hear her reflect on it as we do back in book 4, it's shocking. and she's a fantastic character. But that's good to point out. Yeah, she reads this bird's eye. She's not qualified. She shouldn't be doing that, whatever, technically speaking. But she does, and she does it accurately, and well. All right, that's good. I like that for subtle and consequential. It does, as you say, she's controlling the Xenia. She's also moving the plot forward by fanning the flames of Telemachus's desire to get out of there and get back home. Yeah. And so that's on point. That's on topic for the plot. And that's great. I like, for my subtle but consequential, again, sort of staying on this topic of the plot and how the pieces of the story help to support and build out and strengthen the plot. I like the Eumaeus's backstory that comes out.
I'm glad you're mentioning this.
Yeah, this is a good piece, isn't it? This is a great piece of this chapter. So
it's in and of itself. Sorry to interrupt. In and of itself, it's a good piece.
Yeah,
but it's wonderfully connected to lots of other things.
Well, that's the part I wanted to sort of throw out there and maybe not take the time to go through, each of those connections, because I have a couple of ideas, but I'm not even sure entirely of the connections. But at least to point out, it really fits well under this subtle but consequential. It doesn't seem like, and maybe it's not, a part of the main plot. It's difficult to know exactly how it's a part of the main plot. So the we're talking about is this part that Jay, you just pointed out, is dead on for plot. Telemachus is leaving Sparta. He's heading back home. Peisistratos is heading with him. They're going back to Sandy Pylos, where Telemachus's ship is in the harbor. They're going to, Telemachus and his men who are just idling there are going to jump on board and then sail back home. That all makes sense. Before they leave, they get a gift to go with them. So this is all rolling along. Yeah, okay, awesome. But then back in Ithaca, so the story cuts, back to Ithaca, and Odysseus, it's late at night, and Odysseus is sitting around the fire, this late night fire, excuse me, in which he's talking with Eumaeus, the swineherd again, and Odysseus asks him, "Tell me again your story. How did you come to be here?" And then Eumaeus launches in. And, and I never know. I think as you're teaching with students, you have to help students get through these, because this can be, it is like trying to get your kids to watch, an old black and white movie or something.
Right. That's a good analogy.
They can't take the pacing, or even like, trying to watch, Clint Eastwood Western, from 1960, whatever, with my kids. And, in theory, they're up for it. But man, they just have nowhere to be. And so you got to walk them through it. So here's this side story, but Eumaeus lays out this fantastic story of how he came to be a slave in the house of Laertes, Odysseus's father. And page 283 in this translation, he tells how he's the son of a king. So he comes from royalty, and then he gives this really elaborate, greatly plotted story about how he's kidnapped, he's child trafficked, essentially, with these Phoenicians, who end up selling him off, and Laertes takes him. So it's well worth digging in. It's well worth digging into. But the question that Odysseus asked is, he's called the great tactician when Odysseus asked this question of Eumaeus, "How did you come to be here?" And then after the story is over, Odysseus replies with him, "You roused my pity, telling what you endured when you were young. But surely it wasn't all suffering. Surely Zeus put some good alongside the ill. Torn from your own far home, you had the luck to come into a kind man's service, generous with food and drink, and a good life you lead, unlike my own, all spent in barren roaming from one country to the next till now." And you talk about dramatic irony in this moment. Here's the king of Ithaca talking to this slave who he owns and saying, "Man, you've got the good life over here. Not like me,
right.
Who's suffering through the world." And, Eumaeus kind of did in this, we've talked before about the subtlety of slavery in this time. It's everything slavery, the bad things that it is. But then there's this other part where Eumaeus says, actually, Laertes' wife, Penelope, not Penelope, but his wife raised me as a child, as a kid, along with Odysseus's sister, whose story is told in this. And we were the same age and raised as equals in the household. And then they set me up out here with a job and with clothes
Yep.
and food, and I'm all set. So it's not like chattel slavery exactly. It's something else. But Odysseus says, surely there was some other good, because you've had this life, and Eumaeus, this good life, and Eumaeus affirms it. And so he sort of takes on this thing of, of privilege and the subtle nature of it. Odysseus obviously has privilege as being king. However, being king has led him to having to go to 10 years of war and 10 years of wandering through the world and of loss. And Eumaeus has lost, and so, but also gained. And so it just reminds you of the complexity and subtlety of life. So even though he was nursed as equals with Odysseus's sister, he was himself, really openly trafficked, really as a child, I think we would say.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the consequential story here is to ask, why does the great tactician bring this up? Why does Odysseus, why does he elicit the story from him? And there may be some room to dig into that and find out. One thing that seems possibly obvious to me is that he is testing his loyalty, and then maybe also trying to rouse Eumaeus's loyalty, because he thinks he might need him later, because he's going to tell him, I'm going to go down in town to Odysseus's house, the manor, here soon. And maybe he's trying to remind Eumaeus, hey, you've got it good here. You've been taken care of by that house of Odysseus's. And so if you should be called upon to help fight for it, wouldn't you do that? I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's a guess. He doesn't say it, he doesn't say it openly, but he has some reason for asking him his story. And it's not, and when it's Odysseus, there's always something, there's always something going on. It's not just friendly talk, I think. So I've got that down as my subtle but consequential look into the backstory of Eumaeus in here, and then use it again, like this Theoclymenos thing. How can you connect dots, make it make sense with the plot and with the themes? They're both Theoclymenos and Eumaeus's enslavement. They're both opportunities to do that, and I think a lot of students will sort of take the bait on that, and run.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
My question connects exactly what you were just saying, and kind of takes what you were just saying and kind of steps outside of it and asks some questions of it. There's a lot of characters in Homer. Chryseis in the beginning of the Iliad, Eurycleia, who's the nurse in Ithaca, again, a slave. Chryseis for a while is a sex slave. And Theoclymenos, who's an outlaw on the run, and Eumaeus, who is a slave who takes care of animal. All of these characters have something really interesting in common, and that their lives were lives of privilege, and complete random chance led them to be property. And so this seems to be not a one-off. Like, Homer cares about this. He cares about this idea. Not philosophically for us to think about slavery. Yeah, I think he cares about it in the context of the drama he's writing, and I think it would be similar to us reading the Iliad and the Odyssey. If we know the skeletal structure of the story, there's not as much suspense. The people hearing it originally, there was no suspense. Yeah. But interestingly, it's almost a reminder, regardless of plot, that this is a landscape where the Odysseus's and the Achilles's and the Agamemnons and the Menelaus's are all one fated chance away, one random choice away, one god having a bad day and upset away, one enemy shooting a really well-aimed arrow away from being owned or killed. Being owned. You can go from being royalty to being owned in a heartbeat. And I think, again, that's incredibly terrible in real life. It's great literature, because similar to people who are marginalized having surprising eloquence and persuasiveness, which immediately makes you think, oh, wow, like anybody can say anything in this landscape and be interesting. That's great. And Homer does that. But I also think he keeps us mindful that in the mortal realm, no one's safe.
Yeah. And,
No
and
one's
almost
safe.
anyone can say anything, not just in some raw democratic sense, that, we all have the capacities and we should get past our differences. But back to the point you're saying that anyone can say anything because the person you're talking to might be a former prince.
Yep.
He was raised in a court. She was some other person entirely, but because of fate, because of chance, because of the upending of our lives, you could end up anywhere. And I love the way it just recenters how, how privilege and oppression sort of, get played out in life is much more, to me, much more believable than some sort of, regimented class-based system where all these people are always, oppressed and these people always have it easy. That's some
It's
of that
almost
happens.
more. It's more
not real.
capricious. It's more capricious than that.
Oh my gosh, way more.
It's more. They don't wake up and say these people are going to be sort of well, they kind of do, but arbitrarily marginalized. It's purely militaristic. You're marginalized if you lose war. That's how you get marginalized.
Right.
You're not marginalized because you're not culturally sophisticated. It's all, if you're really effective at killing people, you get not to be marginalized.
Yeah, and you get really lucky
also
in this season of battle.
There's randomness too. Like, Eumaeus was a baby. Like, he didn't lose a war. His nurse took him on a boat, and then a bunch of stuff happened. Like, so I think of Elpenor earlier in the Odyssey.
Yeah.
Homer, I think every part of human experience is interesting to him. And I think we focus on the heroic stuff and the moral stuff and the ethical stuff and the big questions. I'm interested in too in the sort of like stuff underneath the carpet. Like, he has a guy just getting drunk, falling off a roof and dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you know what happens sometimes is like people die in a not interesting way. Like,
what happens to the nurse? What happens to the nurse who steals Eumaeus? She falls over dead. I don't know. Yep. She fell over dead. They had this whole plot, this plan. Maybe it was true love. She and this Phoenician sailor, and they're going to drive off, fly off or whatever. And then all of a sudden she's dead and they throw her overboard, change of plans.
Yeah. And I just think, I think he's interested in everything. I think there's a hierarchy of interest, and I think because of what's expected, obviously the Achilleses and the Odysseus have a special place. But when he starts telling stories about a slave, it's almost like he can't help himself making the slave interesting.
That's a great way of putting it, and he really does. Eumaeus is unbelievable.
He's wicked interesting.
Yeah, he's
Theoclemenus, wicked interesting, and he's an outlaw. Like we shouldn't be interested in him, and he's fascinating.
Right, and you know it because after you're introduced to them, the camera moves and refocuses on someone else, and you want it to go back. Like you want more information. Don't leave yet. Point the camera back in that direction. I want to hear more about this. But he's the swineherd. You shouldn't want to do that.
Yep. Well, we all know, and I don't want to get like corny, but all of us have met someone who has like a very menial job, who has tons of depth and a really interesting story.
Yeah, yeah.
And part of me thinks the Shakespeares of the world and the Homers of the world and the Dickenses of the world really know that. Like they know that what determines whether someone has depth is hard to see on the outside, and I think we often think that as a modern epiphany, but I think Homer starts it.
That's a great point. And the Homers, the Dickens, the Shakespeares, from a certain perspective, you might say, have the best excuse not to see it. They're these accomplished people who you might even, in one of your worst moments, give permission to look down on. Some of these low people because they're so accomplished. And why do they have to share the world, with these boring, unambitious, unaccomplished, people?
Yeah.
And they just don't think that way. They're not thinking that way, at all. And so it is so interesting. Well, I mean, I can close my questions, problems, or puzzle section. It is, I landed on Theoclemenos. I can't get over him. He's a fantastic character. The puzzle or question part of him is, why is he there? If you're looking from this like tightly structured, which as we've said tonight, this book is not necessarily one of those modern, tightly structured novels or Netflix series that we're used to. Still, why is he there? Why is he there? Why does he get thrown in the story? It's not immediately obvious. Now, as we go along, he's going to have a further role, and he continues to be interesting. But he's out there as my problem or puzzle because he's this great side character who you love. Why is he there? How does he come to be there? It's very weird. The takeaway I've gotten from my students over the years, which I've alternately led them into, admittedly, or they've taken on themselves, is it's a question of judgment. To me, one of the great pieces of this is Telemachus is out in the world to prove himself, to make of himself a grown man, a man who can live in the world despite the fact that he didn't have his father there, who's really good at getting around in the world, to teach him about it. And what a fantastic test. This guy comes running out of the woods who says, "Hey, I'm a murderer. Could I have a boat ride with you? Could I just jump on board?" And, I always tell my students, if that ever happens, you're out driving around, you stop for gas at a gas station, someone runs out of the woods and says, "Hey, they're after me." They got blood on their clothes. Maybe, yes, I killed a guy, but they're after me. Which direction are you going? Can I jump in?
Right.
I'm like, say no. Just say no. I want to go on record as having given you that advice. But
unless you're in a Homeric epic, Paul, you didn't make that qualification.
Yeah, right? Unless somehow, you're in this grand life. Telemachus, he doesn't know he's in the epic, though. Jay, we only find out, like, we know, but he doesn't know. He thinks he's just living his life, and he makes this choice. And so it is fun to ask them, did he make the right choice? How could you justify this choice? Why would he do that? He's not shown himself to be a fool, far from it. But he says, well, I can't pry your hands off the sideboards of the ship. I can see that. Come on board. Let's go. I'll make a place for you. And he comes in. So he makes a judgment. He makes a judgment. And that's really what's at stake here. Can you make the right decisions under pressure in real time? To do the right thing, because the other side is, what if he says no, and then as they're sailing away, he sees these other people come out of the woods and they beat him to death or something. Mm-hmm. You never get that off your conscience. Wow, I let this guy get beat to death. Should I have taken him? Maybe I should have. And so there's no safe choice here. You just have to choose. It feels sort of like Aristotelian, ethics, like the right choice. You just have to ask the person who knows how to make right choices what the right choice is. There's no principled right choice. You're there in the moment. You feel it, you take it in, you understand it, and you do this thing. So we're along for the ride. We'll find out. Whether he did the right thing or not. And so there's a lot of neat edges there. So for this chapter, there are, Theo Clemenus represents one of those things that you can use to drive into the story, drive into, however you want to say it, like the values, the thing, the aesthetics, even the directions that Homer points the camera, and you can find so much for students to read and think about. And it's a way of drawing them in, which I think is our job with these books.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's what I've got. That's my questions, problems, puzzles. All right. Nice. How the prince returns, or how they came to Ithaca. It gets the plot moving again, everything back online. And then there's a little bit of energy, a little bit of excitement building here, because we're not too far off of Odysseus seeing his son essentially for the first time. I don't know if you count seeing your infant, son. I mean, I guess it's precious, but
I'm telling your wife that you said that.
But I mean, do you really have to be at the hospital? I mean,
right.
So I wasn't.
I was golfing.
I was bowling. Okay. I mean, I'll see him. I'll see him later. I mean, just wait till he grows up and he can talk.
Yes, that's right.
So we're getting there. Well, anyway, nice. I like it, Jay. Those are good points. Thanks for bringing those out. Those are really helpful. If you've enjoyed this discussion, found things that you like, join in the comments. Like our channel, like the episode, subscribe so that you can get that notification when the new episode comes out. And soon we'll have book 16 out as well. All right. Thanks, Jay.
Bye, Paul. Good to see you.
All right. You too.